Welcome to the Porecast. I'm your host, Carly Harmson. As a licensed master esthetician with nearly 2 decades of experience, I feel confident to meet you here every week to educate about the latest trends and must-have skin treatments, as well as to decode the science and demystify the overwhelming world of skincare. Whether you're a wide-eyed, curious beginner or you're a veteran skincare pro, this is the podcast for you. So grab your favorite face mask and come discover with me someone who's not only a skincare guru, but also a card-carrying member of Skincare Obsessed, just like you. Get ready for this episode of the podcast, starting now. Hello, welcome back. If you didn't know, I take the summers off social media, and as a result, I did take a little summer break from the podcast too. I know how busy you probably all were, and probably weren't tuning in much anyway, so I think a win-win. I hope. But I'm so excited to be back, and I can't believe that we are in September. The summer came and went. I can hardly believe it. But just because summer is officially coming to a close doesn't mean it's not important to discuss sun protection and practicing safe sun. With the heat, full sun, pools, and water parks, camping, barbecue season waning, many start to lax on their sun protection too. So, I want to spend some time today talking about why it is so important to continue to wear sunscreen daily in the fall, winter, beyond, all seasons, all year, 365 days, people. And the obvious and overarching reason to continue daily practice of sun protection, regardless of season or daily forecast, is that scary word, skin cancer. Skin cancer is the most common type of cancer in the United States, and 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer by the time they're 70. So, this is a staggering statistic. To be clear, there are different types of skin cancer, including melanoma, which is the most serious type of skin cancer, and if left undetected or untreated, very serious. It could potentially even be fatal. But there's also non melanoma skin cancers like basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. These cancers are much less serious than a melanoma, but they're not without some cause for concern, as they can be invasive at best and disfiguring at worst. The good news here is that with more awareness, better education, and access to healthcare, improved detection methods, we are seeing a positive trend in younger populations who have grown up with better sun protection practices. We've been shown consistently, and we know through research, that sunscreen is effective in preventing both melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancers. One study published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology demonstrated that regular sunscreen use of the participants reduced the incidence of melanoma by 50%. This was a group of Aussies that were looked at a long-term study. Norway. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. So, while I must mention the main purpose of practicing safe sun, AVI, prevention of skin cancers, this is not an episode focusing on everything skin cancer. And actually, we're going to be sharing more information on best practices for sunscreen usage rather than information on skin cancer. So if you need that information, a quick Google search is available, or feel free to reach out to me and I can direct you to that. Practicing safe sun and not total sun abstinence is important not only to protect the skin from ultimately an unfortunate diagnosis of skin cancer, but to protect the skin from other concerns that many of us care about too. In today's episode, we will cover why sun protection is important, aside from prevention of skin cancer. We've talked about that. What SPF actually means, SPF ingredients and formulation, sunscreen and sun exposure myths, tips on application, and at the very end, I'll share a few of my favorite sunscreens at the moment. So let's get to everything under the sun when it comes to sun protection. Are you ready? If preventing skin cancer is not enough of a reason for sun protection for you, this should be. Most of the signs of aging you'll see in your lifetime, I'm talking fine lines, wrinkles, that loss of important collagen and elastin in the skin, sun and age spots, laxity, large pores, blotchy, muddled skin, rough texture or appearance. All of these symptoms, this laundry list of symptoms, is caused by what we call extrinsic aging. Extrinsic aging is thought to be kind of outside environmental factors as opposed to genetic or hereditary factors. So these include things like pollution, stress, diet, and of course, UV exposure, sun exposure. Okay. Did you know how much of aging is caused by extrinsic aging? An estimated 90%. Do you know how much of that aging is caused by UV exposure? An estimated 90%. So, with those figures in mind, this really demonstrates an important lesson. Now, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, depending on on how you look at it, I was a feral latchkey kid growing up, running off the land from sunup to sundown in the summers, and I constantly would have regular sunburns. Some were very severe, even. I was a slave to the tanning beds in my teens, and I even worked at a tanning salon as a 17-year-old. And yeah, I'd get into the bed twice in a shift because I was cold. So, talk about an underdeveloped brain, don't you think? So this was before, importantly, I went to school to become a master esthetician. The damage I did in my childhood and youth, though, is now showing up like today in my 40s, and it's haunting me. That damage done all those years ago takes time to manifest to those signs of aging. So, hypothetically speaking, if you're under the age of 18 and happen to be listening to this podcast episode, I'm talking to you, okay? I'm talking to you right now. If it's not you, just hang tight. You can virtually never age. I'll say it again. You can virtually never age if you just take the time to protect your skin properly at a young age. Sun protection is literally the fountain of youth, especially again when started at a young age. Sunscreen regularly is one of the best anti aging treatments available and also happens to be one of the most affordable and accessible skincare categories out. And that is why we're dedicating a whole episode to it today. Let's start with SPF. SPF stands for sun protection factor. And for most of us, we consider this like a simple mathematical formula. I always joke I'm an esthetician, not a mathematician for a reason, but this is math even I can handle. So we'll get into it. According to the FDA, SPF, this is the actual definition, is a measure of how much solar energy, aka UV radiation, is required to produce sunburn on protected skin, for example, in the presence of sunscreen. So, while this can cross over into duration, how long you can stay in the sun before getting sunburn, it's not quite that simple. Why? Because this can vary from person to person, how melanated someone's skin is versus time of day. For most laymen or laywomen, though, you can look at this kind of like a duration of time. That can be useful. So, in some cases, it may make sense to figure out a level of protection by first determining, ideally, hypothetically, not literally, how quick one begins to burn, i.e., produce solar energy in the skin, in the sun, when unprotected. So, in this example, we'll use myself. I'm fair, so let's say, for the sake of the example, I begin to burn in 10 minutes at 2 p.m., which is peak solar energy exposure time. And this is with my skin fully exposed, no SPF. Next, I will choose a SPF product with an SPF number. Let's say I choose SPF 30. So we can multiply the minutes I begin to burn, which was 10, with the sun protection factor number to hypothetically determine the amount of time, again with this intensity of solar energy of sun protection. So this isn't exactly what SPF means, but it's a way hypothetically to assess the efficacy of that number. So in this example, an SPF 30 sunscreen theoretically allows me to stay in the sun 30 times longer without burning. And this could be, if we're making it relative to time, 300 minutes or 5 hours. Alas, this is not as simple as apply sunscreen and be protected for 300 minutes. Most of you know this. If you don't, we're going to talk about it. There are best practices involved for sure, and we'll cover those a little bit later. But before we do that, I do want to share a little story time with y'all. When I was a newer green esthetician, the FDA, Food Drug Administration, got involved in our little big world of beauty. And it was a bit unprecedented as the FDA is pretty hands off when it comes to cosmetics. This all culminated in 2009, 2010, when brand manufacturers were spiraling out of control as it related to SPF labeling. The biggest offense, labeling products with SPF 70, SPF 80, SPF 90, SPF 100 plus 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 plus. Consumers were misled to believe that they could apply an SPF 100 once at the beach and feel like they would be protected the entire duration of their time. What ended up happening is a lot of consumers sustained bad burns and injuries as a result of the mislabeling or marketing of these big brands. So, these changes, proposed in 2011, included more airtight SPF labeling, changing waterproof claims to water resistant, sunblock to the word sunscreen because you can't block the UV rays, only filter some out, broad spectrum claims, and finally, just labeling in a more standardized format. And I think this was a good intervention on the FDA's part. Guys, it was out of control and a frenzy there in the late aughts. So I supported it overall, but no, in light of this, it's especially difficult to manufacture an SPF product in the US, which has us kind of trailing behind in terms of sunscreen innovation, like we're seeing in K beauty right now and a lot of European skincare. Because of the global innovation that's been leaving us behind, there were some adjustments to that original proposal from 2011. So that is some good news. The final sunscreen draft order in 2021 proposed allowing manufacturers to label up to a 60. Originally, it was a 50, although the FDA still considers anything above a 50 highly misleading. Their words, not mine. So do with that what you will. All right, moving on. SPF value is important, with dermatologists recommending a minimum of SPF 30 daily. But the point difference of anything beyond 50 is pretty minute. It is thought that SPF 15 blocks about 93% of UVB rays. SPF 30 blocks about 97% of UVB rays, and SPF 50 blocks about 98% of UVB rays. So that's 1 percentage point difference there. So don't get too hung up on SPF value. Really, an SPF 30 for daily wear suffices. Now I want to talk sunscreen ingredients. It is generally accepted that there are two categories of sunscreen ingredients or filters. Those are chemical, aka organic filters, and physical, aka inorganic filters. With chemical filters applied to the surface of the skin, they work by absorbing that high energy UV light molecules or photons, and they convert them into lower energy particles like heat. This allows the energy to scatter and dissipate off of the skin rather than penetrate into the deeper layers of the skin and wreak havoc. The most common of the chemical ingredients are avobenzone, oxybenzone, octocrylene, octinoxate, homosalate. There's a list, there's a lot more. Physical filters, on the other hand, and sometimes these are called mineral filters, work by creating a barrier on the surface of the skin that can reflect or bounce ultraviolet rays off. This is kind of the simple way to describe it. So these ingredients are actually reflective in nature, which is why in traditional flash photography, these ingredients sometimes flash back and create like a white cast or mask on the face. Spoiler, these same ingredients are often used in makeup foundations too. And these two ingredients are zinc oxide and titanium dioxide. So these ingredients can be used on their own, whether they are chemical or mineral in their respective categories, to make up an SPF. So this may come down to a concentration and or blend of the ingredients and concentration. So for example, you may find a 21% zinc oxide formula. That's it. That's all that's in there as far as sunscreen filters go. Another might have 3% avobenzone with 10% homosalate, 5% octisalate, and 10% octocrylene. and they both would be an SPF 50 ish. And also broad spectrum, and more on that in just a few seconds. Oh, silly me. I forgot to mention that all skincare that the FDA does oversee, I'm doing that with quotation fingers because it's not much, the safety of SPF gets a special consideration as it's classified as a non-prescription drug thanks to some ancient law enacted in like 1938. So you should see all US available sunscreens with a drug fact label rather than a traditional cosmetic ingredient list. On that drug fact label, you will see all the sunscreen ingredients and their percentages, respectively, with the drug purpose written as sunscreen to prevent sunburn. In the US, there is a classification of broad spectrum. This means it protects from both the shorter UVB ray and the longer UVA ray. Simply stated, UVB can cause the more superficial inflammation known as a sunburn or epidermal cancers. We call it the UVB burning ray, while UVA can penetrate deeper into the dermis and cause not only inflammation but DNA damage, which can have a whole host of skin issues immediately and down the road. We call UVA the aging ray for this reason. And not all sun filter ingredients are broad spectrum. Zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are, avobenzone is, Mexoryl SX and Mexoryl XL are, oxybenzone, oxycrylene are. So when choosing sunscreen, this should probably be considered. So chemical, mineral, what's better, chemical or physical sunscreen? The answer is both. It really comes down to preferences and philosophy. There are some pros and cons to both categories. Chemical sunscreen filters tend to be lightweight, even weightless, and disappear into the skin. They tend to have more of, like, can I say, an aesthetically pleasing texture, je ne sais quoi, if you will, compared to physical or mineral filters. And individuals that hate the feeling of SPF usually are a good candidate for chemical filters, as their formulas are so easy to apply, generally can be undetectable in appearance and feel once applied and absorbed into the skin. The challenges with chemical filters are that they are more likely to cause irritation in the skin. They are notorious for being the ingredients that can cause stinging in the eyes when applied too close or with sweating. There's some environmental concerns with some of the chemical sunscreen ingredients in places like Hawaii, where they've banned these ingredients due to allegedly affecting reef health. And finally, some controversy surrounding some chemical sunscreens, whether or not they have ability to become an endocrine disruptors or if they are potentially carcinogenic. Those are some of the claims that you might be hearing out there in the wild, wild west of TikTok on why people aren't wearing sunscreen. Physical and mineral sunscreen ingredients may be a good option for those who are concerned with environment and want something more reef safe, or for those who want to be more organic overall in their approach due to the hormone concerns. I'm laughing because ironically, these minerals are actually considered inorganic, but they fit within an organic skincare philosophy. But the challenges with zinc oxide and titanium dioxide are the cosmetic elegance or lack thereof historically. These tend to be thicker in texture, more full bodied, if you will, and can leave a white or ashy cast to the skin. So for darker melanated skin, these tend to be way less inclusive and aesthetic. With that being said, though, sunscreen formulation and manufacturing is improving and evolving every day. So some brands will tint their mineral formulas to counteract that white cast or formulate with ingredients like silicone derivatives to provide a more aesthetically pleasing finish to the product. Speaking of, micronization or nanotechnology in sunscreen formulas flooded onto the scene in a mass appeal way about 15 years ago. But the first cosmetic brands to introduce it were Dior, actually, in like 1981. And while it greatly improved the textures and finish of mineral SPF, it has later come with controversy as these nanoparticles are heavily debated today for their safety profile. The FDA, as well as Other regulating bodies around the world have generally concluded that sunscreens containing these nanoparticles of zinc oxide or titanium dioxide are safe for human use. But it's all good if you prefer to use products that don't have nanotechnology. There's a lot of great options now on the market. So, back to chemical and mineral filters, it's not uncommon, not at all, to use a combination of both for really thorough sun protection product. Many of my favorite formulas over the years were a combination of both type of filters. And again, I'll share a few of my faves at the moment, summer 2024, year of our Lord, but you'll have to wait until the end for that. All right, know that sunscreens come available in many forms and textures, including sunscreen sticks, sprays, powders, creams, lotions, gels, fluids. So there's truly something for everyone doing every type of task or activity. Determining a preference of texture and finish, SPF value, chemical or physical or combo, tint or no tint, fragrance or no fragrance, weightless or bodied. This will vary from person to person. Again, when asked what the best sunscreen is, I'll share my faves at the end, I promised. But when asked, I always say the best sunscreen is the one that you'll wear, whatever that is. And not to get too left field here, I do want to make a note about sun exposure. If you've been with me for a while, for some years, you know that I like to share science, and I also like to share science that can be a little against the grain, a little against the status quo. What can I say? I'm disruptive. Some of you may remember a few years ago when I shared on my Instagram some studies about the benefits of unprotected sun exposure. And as passionate as I am about skin health and education, I stand by what I shared years ago. The truth is, there's some benefit to some controlled, unprotected sun exposure. I know, wild. What do I mean by that? Well, without getting into the weeds, improves circadian rhythm, mood benefits, vitamin D synthesis. With that being said, though, there's only one case where I allow my skin to be exposed without sunscreen, and that would be in the morning, early morning, and early evening. So, this is when the rays are not as intense. A good rule of thumb is if you check the daily UV index and you see a 2 or below, anything under a 2, this is considered pretty safe unprotected. And it couldn't be easier. Your smartphone weather app has this feature. FYI, the UV index is from 0 to 11, with 6 and above as high to very high to severe. In the low category between 2 to 3, most would be generally safe from intense UV radiation. So, yeah, you can have your cake and eat it too. And this UV index will change depending on the time of day. So remember, 2 p.m. where I live, that's peak solar energy time. Ooh, can you handle the controversy? Yeah, practice safe sun, my friends, but we don't want to be so black and white in our thinking of it. As far as sun protection year round versus seasonal, it's true that sunscreen sales lift in the late spring and early summer, and we definitely think about it more. Longer sunny days, more skin exposed, itty bitty tiny bikinis, but you definitely have UV exposure year round. Don't believe me? According to the World Health Organization, which is made up of a body of people much, much smarter than me, it's estimated that about 80% of UV rays penetrate an overcast day, or could be a rainy overcast day. In the northern hemisphere where I live in the winter, these rays can be intensified due to reflection of frozen water. I live in a snow globe a few months out of the year. So even though I work inside most days, I still put daily sunscreen on every day, rain or shine. All right, let's round out today's episode with some tips and best practices when it comes to practicing that safe sun. First, let's talk about dose. You may have heard various measurements flying around: 2 finger lengths worth, 1 shot glass worth, a nickel sized dollop, half a teaspoon, 2 milligrams of sunscreen per square centimeter of skin. That one makes me laugh because, like, who the hell knows how much that is? Like, come on. So it's hard, really, to give a hard defined amount because surface area from face to face, décolleté to décolleté, and body to body varies so much. But according to the American Academy of Dermatology, the AAD, 1 ounce, yes, a shot glass size, is sufficient for full body. So if you are presumptuous, like I'm about to be, let's be generous and say the face, including ears, neck, 360 all the way around, and chest, right? Décolleté, make up about 15% of the body's full surface area. I'm going with 15%. It's an easier number for me. Again, esthetician, not mathematician. This would mean if we took that 1 ounce for a body size, be about a teaspoon for the face, neck, and chest. You know, tits to top. Tits to top of head. For face alone, about 1/3 to 1/2 of that. So 1/3 to 1/2 teaspoon. But again, there's some teeny tiny petite faces and there's some really big faces. So this is just a guideline, and it's also a little bit more challenging to measure in like a liquid, fluid, or powder texture. So don't fixate too much on it. A thorough, even, and light application should do the trick, and toppers, reapplications, will improve protection. Inasmuch, the AAD and the FDA recommend reapplying sunscreen every 2 hours or when you are sweating or in and out of water after towel drying. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, yeah, that's really easy to do, Carly, at the beach, but what about every day? And that, my friends, is when your sunscreen toppers come into play. And what do I love most for a topper? A powder sunscreen. So easy to apply over sunscreen with makeup. You can get into the nooks and crannies, things like the nostrils, if you are skiing on the slope, like a lot of my people do, or you're out on the water, that's helpful. On and in the ears, tops of eyelids. These places burn too. In fact, the nose and ears, and even the lips, are some of the top areas skin cancer is diagnosed in. So those high points of the face. The powder sunscreen is also great to take into the scalp and in parts of hair. Millennials, we finally embrace the middle part, right? Putting some sunscreen there is not a bad idea. It's truly the easiest way to reapply throughout the day, every day. Oh, yeah, while on the subject of daily sunscreen, you may have a separate sunscreen as your daily driver. This may be a more aesthetically pleasing, non comedogenic, maybe even tinted sunscreen formulated for the face. These tend to be smaller packaging that are a little more costly, but oftentimes they're worth it. So you've got your daily driver, and then you might have an activity sunscreen. In my world, this looks like a sunscreen that's often a spray sunscreen for activities like swimming, hiking, working in the garden, and I primarily use this on my body. It turns out, for me personally, my skin does not love fully chemical sunscreens on my face. Like, they get really hot and irritating, but they're just fine on my body. So I can totally go with a fully chemical sunscreen on my body if I want to. And I'm not alone in this. It's not uncommon for people to be a little reactive to chemical sunscreen on the face. So an activity sunscreen might be more economical. They usually are bigger, larger packaging and more affordable ounce per ounce. Regardless of daily or activity sunscreen, there may be recommendations to apply the sunscreen 15 minutes prior to exposure. And this really applies to the use of chemical sunscreens to allow them time to absorb, because that's where they work, is just in those top layers of skin. But it doesn't hurt to do it with mineral sunscreens too. But if you don't get it on 15 minutes prior, not the end of the world. Another best practice, skincare should be layered appropriately. And rule of thumb is it's applied lightest to thickest, with sunscreen being the last product applied before makeup if makeup is being worn. It's mostly a myth that chemical sunscreen must be applied to clean skin. And I'm not sure where this originated from, though I've seen it on some pretty big publications like, what the hell, Oprah magazine. The the important takeaway is that you allow absorption of skincare before applying sunscreen, and you don't want too many layers of product sitting and preventing chemical from doing its thing. Okay? We good? Oh, and if that's not enough, and don't come for me when I tell you this, believe me, I love a multifunctional product as much as the next, but makeup and sunscreen for your daily is not sufficient. I'll say that again. Makeup and sunscreen is not enough. Why? A number of reasons. The main ones being makeup migration. Makeup rubs, it migrates, it moves. And more importantly than that, the 1/2 to 1 teaspoon you need would be like so much product, like Meredith Duxbury much product. And that was so 2021. It's 2024, and we do clean girl makeup now. So it's not real life, baby. Nobody's putting that much makeup on. So it's really not sufficient. If you've got a great SPF daily and then you put your makeup foundation on and it has an SPF 2, is that a bonus? Does that double down protection? No. Not really. While it might help in a more thorough coverage or protection, in other words, fill the gaps you might have missed with your SPF, layering SPF products do not compound. Meaning, if I have an SPF fluid of 30 and then I put my makeup foundation over the top of it, it has an SPF 15. Do I have an SPF 45? No, no, you silly goose. Why? Do you remember? Did you catch this? SPF is not a dose, it's more like duration. So, because SPF doesn't mean a rating of protection, it means a length or duration or allowability of protection. Do you see how that works? Think of it this way. You paint your nails the hot summer color of 2024. I don't know, probably a Barbie pink. Still, it remains tried and true. I digress. With that first coat, you got pretty good coverage, and the lacquer is going to last 7 days. But you do notice it's a little like thin and sparse and patchy in some areas. So by adding a second coat, it doesn't compound and last 14 days now. It just is a more thorough application and finish. It covers any of those gaps or thin areas. I think this analogy works. You let me know. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to layer makeup with SPF over SPF, but it's not compounding the way some people might think it is. Okay, back to some tips. So, when applying sunscreen, it's best not to rub in your sunscreen. This can cause uneven application and may result in a balling up or pilling of product. Gently, like kind of tapping or patting in your sunscreen is recommended for most sunscreens. And choosing skincare that marries well with sunscreen can prevent peeling of product too, by the way. Some formulas do not play nice. For example, some silicone derivatives, which are often found in sunscreen formulas to get that aesthetically pleasing texture, sometimes they don't mix with certain water soluble ingredients. And of course, using too much of any skincare before sunscreen could cause pilling too. So, those are a few tips to prevent that from happening. Let's talk expiration. Many manufacturers now add expiration dates to sunscreen specifically because, remember, they are in that drug category according to the FDA. So, my thoughts are that potentially it's more liability. So brands are just doing this, but I don't know for sure. But I do know in the event they do not put an expiry on the packaging, they must test shelf stable for 3 years. You know, if you get a product that doesn't have an expiration date, maybe write like the month and year you purchased it with a Sharpie on it. And then if you have a sunscreen without an expiry date, then just inspect it each year. Although you're not a seasonal sunscreen wearer, right? Right? Inspect it occasionally then. And if texture, appearance, smell has changed, then it's probably time to toss and replace. Okay, let's recap, shall we? First, get you a daily driver, girl. Not a makeup with SPF, but something dedicated specifically to a facial sunscreen that you love. You love the texture of it, you love the scent, you love the finish of it. And remember, the best sunscreen is the one you'll use. Next is SPF 30 is the most recommended by dermatologists for that daily wear. And remember, a 30 and a 50 is not much difference in terms of filtering out UV rays or protection. Third, reapply every 2 hours. So for daily wear, when you're not at the beach, the easiest way to do this is with a sunscreen topper. They are your best friends. 4, apply thoroughly and evenly. And you'll know what that is. Whatever that fill is, it's likely going to be enough. 5, and you'll be wearing sunscreen every day, so you're not going to have a bottle lying around from last summer, right? But in the event you do notice the sunscreen texture, smell changing, time to get a new SPF. Finally, last but not least, unprotected safe sun exposure might have health benefits that outweigh the risk, but if you're going to engage in that activity, be sure that the rest of that time is made up in consistent, committed use of daily sunscreen. in conjunction with other best safe sun practices, which we haven't talked about, things like wearing light layers to cover skin when possible, large hats, hanging out in shaded areas instead of direct sunlight. All of these things together are going to be the greatest anti-aging treatment money and time can buy, and it turns out it's pretty affordable. Now, I did promise I'd share some of my favorite sunscreens personally and professionally, so I'm going to do that now. But no, these are genuine favorites of mine over the years, and there's zero sponsorship or affiliation with these, with the exception of one brand that I do educate for, just full transparency, but I have no financial interest in sharing that recommendation. So let's go ahead with that. The first one is Elta MD UV Clear SPF 46. This comes in a tinted and non-tinted formula, and it features a light texture that is oil free, fragrance free, and it does include 5% niacinamide. It has 9% zinc oxide and 7.5% octinoxate, and it utilizes a micronized technology. It does also have a silicone derivative, which is cyclopentasiline, and I love this texture. I've been a huge fan over the years, and while I don't have acne anymore, it's been 10 years since I had acne. I still use the sunscreen sometimes, and I do recommend it still, specifically for like problematic and acne prone skin. The next one that I love, this one has been my daily driver for a couple years now, is the Elastin Hydratint Pro Mineral Broad Spectrum Sunscreen SPF 36. All these sunscreens have like the longest names. Whew. Anyway, like I said, this has been my daily driver for years and it finishes beautifully on my dry, sensitive skin. It's another tinted formula. What can I say? I do love a tinted sunscreen. This is a mineral only formula with 8.9% titanium dioxide and 3.4% zinc oxide. It does have dimethicone, which gives it a nice finish, although, no, it could be congestive for some. Oh, and it features Ectuan, which is a rising superstar ingredient I featured back on one of my earlier episodes called Beauty Buzz Trending Skincare Ingredients. This was the winter 2024 edition. So check that out if you want to learn more about Ectuan. All right. Number 3 is the Eminence Daily Defense Tinted SPF 50 Plus. This is the brand I represent as an educator, so full disclosure there. But the reason I'm new to using this SPF is because it is new. It just barely launched a couple months ago, and it's a light fluid texture, another tinted formula. What can I say? This features mineral only protection as well. So this is a zinc oxide 11.5%, broad spectrum coverage. It finishes natural with a slight radiance, and it has blue light protection too. So this is quickly becoming a fave. Number 4 is Color Science Sunforgettable Total Protection Brush On Shield SPF 50, the OG powder sunscreen. This was the first powder sunscreen I ever tried back in 2010. Although they might have adjusted the packaging and the formula a little bit, it still hits with titanium dioxide, 22.5%, zinc oxide, 22.5%. This is a great for even the most sensitive skin. And this one is actually recommended by the Skin Cancer Foundation. It's an amazing topper to your daily driver. Number 5 is the La Roche-Posay Anthelios Ultra Light Fluid Facial Sunscreen SPF 60. This is actually another OG for me. Early in my career, I worked with this, and I love that compared to some professional skincare, it's an affordable and accessible option. The texture back in the aughts was like novel because it was that like liquid fluid, and it was really exciting. So it's very lightweight. You have to shake the fluid in the bottle before each use. And this is a chemical sunscreen. This features 3% avobenzone, 10% homosalate, 5% octisalate, and 7% octocrylene. And it finishes more matte on the skin. And just as a side note, fun fact, when this originally launched in those late aughts, it featured Mexoryl, SX, and they also had an XL formula, which both are no longer available in the US thanks to the FDA. Although this formula is very popular outside of the States, this is actually a French brand, so globally it's available. You can, or you right up until recently, were able to find Mexoryl SX, a very small amount of it, in an SPF 15 because that was the max the FDA approved. So La Roche-Posay had an SPF 15 product with it, but I haven't been able to find it online. So it may be discontinued altogether in their SPF portfolio. Other than this product, Mixoryl is not available in any formula in the US I'm aware of. So if I'm wrong, let me know, but it is available globally. Speaking of affordable options, this one surprised me a little bit. A little bit of a dark horse. The Trader Joe's Daily Facial Sunscreen. This is the viral Super Goop dupe. This sunscreen actually does live up. It is oil-free, gel texture that's sweat and water resistant, and it's another full chemical sunscreen containing 3% avobenzone, 12% homosalate, 5% octisalate, and 6% octocrylene. It's broad spectrum protection. I will tell you, it has a very silicone texture. It has a couple different types of silicone in it, which is not for everyone, but it does vanish into an almost invisible layer. So this is a sunscreen even my husband can get down with. So if you can get over like the initial slick texture, some people would describe it as an oil slick texture, it dries down to like an undetectable finish, and it's perfect for people who don't like the feel of sunscreen on their skin at all, but they have to get through that initial application. And it's like $8, people. I think the Super Goop's like 40 plus. So it's like the same thing for $8. And a couple K-Beauty SPFs on my radar that I'm trying more long term. So I'll share them with you here, but I will get back to you hopefully with a better review on them. And these are the Haru Haru Wonder Black Rice Moisture Air Fit Daily Sunscreen SPF 50 plus. Again, these names. The Isntree Hyaluronic Acid Watery Sun Gel SPF 50 plus, and the Skin 1004 Madagascar Centella Hyalu. This is a tough one. Let me try that again. Skin 1004 Madagascar Centella Hyala Sika Water Fit Sun Serum SPF 50 plus. Woo! So again, hope to give a more thorough review on these in the future, but don't sleep on International Sunscreen. Like I said, they have some liberty to innovate in ways that we can't here in the US. All right, my friends, that wraps up our episode today. So tell me, is there an SPF product that you're obsessed with? Is there something I missed, or any road you'd like me to go down a little bit more? Anything you'd like me to deep dive on that we maybe skimmed the surface of today? I always love to hear from you. So until next time, see ya. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you liked this episode, be sure to share it with a bestie or on your socials. And if you love the episode, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Your positive feedback means so much to me. You can connect with me at The Real Besthetician on Instagram or The Besthetician anywhere else. And hey babe, this week's podcast looks like clear with a chance of glow. See you next time.